Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast. This is our 40th episode, and we are glad that we invited our new friend, Brian Bogert.
So Brian is a human behavior and performance coach, and he also does keynote speaking, and he has a YouTube page where he does Bogert Bullets, where he's genuinely trying to help 1 billion people.
Yeah, and this conversation really touched on all the different themes that we love to talk about in conversation: being genuine, being authentic, and being consistent in your effort to promote your brand and promote yourself. But he touched on a really key one that we sometimes miss, but it's all about perspective.
Right. Value creation, joining a conversation. So this is a great conversation for you to join in on. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's coming right up. But if you like to listen to podcasts, we're on Google or on Apple. You can find us any directory that you could possibly think of. So enjoy the show.
Enjoy the show, guys.
Great. Well, we're in conversation with Brian Bogert. Brian, we usually start off with you giving us a little information about who you are and what you do.
Cool. So I'm actually going to tell a story first, and then we'll jump into the who I am and what I do. I think it's important context for our conversation today. So anybody who's listening or watching, unless you're driving, just close your eyes for 1 second. I'll tell you when to open them back up. I want you to imagine walking out of a shopping store after a great shopping trip, walking to your car, turning your head and seeing a truck barreling 40 miles an hour right at you with no time to react. You can open your eyes now. That's where this portion of my story begins. My mom, my brother, and I went to our local Walmart to get a 1-inch paintbrush. As we were headed back to the car, I've always had an excitement and vigor for life, so it wasn't a surprise I was the first one there, ready to get home and put that paintbrush into use. And this was back in the days before we had key fobs. So I literally had to wait by the car for my mom to get up close enough to put the key in the door and unlock it. As I was standing there, a truck pulls up in front of the store and the driver and middle passenger get out. And the passenger all the way to the right felt the truck moving backwards. So just like any one of us would do, he moves over to put his foot on the brake, but he instead hit the gas. Combination of shock and force threw him up onto the steering wheel, up onto the dashboard. And before you know it, he's catapulting 40 miles an hour across the parking lot right at us with no time to react. And we were parked in an end spot. So he went up and over the median, went up under the tree in the median, hit our car, knocked me down, ran over me diagonally, tore my spleen, left a tire track scar on my stomach, and continued on to completely sever my left arm from my body.
Jeez.
So there I am laying in the asphalt on a 115-degree day in Phoenix with my arm 10 feet away. My mom and brother just watched the entire thing happen. So did my guardian angel. There was a nurse that walked out of the store right when this took place. And so she saw the immediate life and limb in front of her. She rushed into action, came over, stopped the bleeding, instructed some innocent bystanders to run inside, grab a cooler, fill it with ice, and have my arm on ice within minutes. Had she not done one or both of those things, Frank, Jack, I either wouldn't be here with you today, or I'd be here with you today with a cleaned up stump and no arm. And so I know a lot of people weren't expecting it to go there today, but it is important to understand that a part of my path and a part of my journey, a part of who I am and the work that I do is, as I'm sure you can assume at this point, foundational in some of the things that have happened to me. So yes, I realize I have a very unique story. But what I've realized in all my time of doing this is we all have unique stories. So what's important is that we pause and become aware of the lessons we can extract from those stories, and then become intentional with how do we apply them into our lives. So I'm going to share 2 lessons with you. One, the first, and this I learned very early, was I learned not to get stuck by what had happened to me, but instead get moved by what I could do with it. And the second I didn't realize until far later, because I spent a lot of those post-accident years in a fog. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, although I knew what was happening to me, I was also being guided through the process. My parents, however, were not in a fog. They were very aware of the unceasing medical treatments, years of recovery and physical therapy. And the idea of seeing their son grow up without the use of his left arm was a source of great suffering for them. And so they literally willed themselves day in and day out to do what was necessary, what was tough, to embrace all the pains necessary to strengthen and heal me so that they could avoid the suffering of seeing their son grow up without the use of his left arm. So whether it was intentional or not, they engraved in me a philosophy and way of living, which was to embrace pain to avoid suffering. And I believe when this is done right, that's also where we gain freedom. So this is the same concept that I used to not only overcome this unique injury, but how my business partners and I built our last business from $250,000 to over $15 million in revenue within the span of a decade. And now how I flipped that on its head as a human behavior performance coach and speaker to help hundreds of organizations and individuals just like you, just like the people listening, become more aware, more intentional, and more of who they already are, their most authentic selves. Because I believe this is when the door starts to crack to perspective, motivation, and direction.
Yeah, great. You can tell he's been on many podcasts.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
what I heard a lot was perspective, right? And to be your authentic self, you really have to understand that what your perspective is, but not only what your perspective, but that everybody else's perspectives are different as well. And we were just talking about this with somebody else earlier, is that once you understand that your perspective is unique to yourself, and you have to put yourself out there to be able to connect with other people, whether you're selling to them, whether you're trying to build a brand. You can't fob that off on somebody else to do it. It literally has to come from you, because you have your own unique perspective on everything. And if they're going to do business with you, it has to be it's got to come from you.
Yeah. So I couldn't agree with you more. I also love that I didn't even use the word perspective in any of the intro, but that's what you picked up on, because that is one of the things I talk about that I gleaned most from this is perspective points us at what's important. I mean, it always does. And so when you have the opportunity to kind of tap into not only your own stories, your own perspective, your own lessons that you can learn, but also tap into the collective wisdom and lessons of other people, seek other people's perspectives, their viewpoint, the lens they view the world through. That's where you start to really focus on human connection and creating those types of sustainable bonds. And that's a big part of the work that I do, is really focusing on that human connection, because at the end of the day, everything comes back to the human element. Right. Business, relationships, like I don't care what it is, anything we do on this planet, even in a transactional type business where there doesn't seem like there's people involved, or it's automated, or Amazon, there's still people involved.
Yeah, right.
There's still a customer journey. There's still customer service. There's still people who have to fulfill. Everything that, even when we're not interacting with other people, there's always people involved. So if we pay attention to that, perspective points us to what's important. And I'm really happy that you went there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that from the conversations, and once again, this is the 40th episode, so this is the end of season 1. And I think that's a great kind of lesson that we've learned out throughout all the conversations has been that one piece is to bring back the human element to what you do on a day-to-day basis, and how, doing blanket marketing calls and trying to gather as many leads as you can. And I just spoke to somebody yesterday who's all about LinkedIn and how to properly use it as a tool. And he's, how irritating it is to get those messages via LinkedIn where it's just a sell. And you hear from a whole bunch of people, that's the growing, ideology. That's how you get sales. That's how you get, but there's that human element to it where it's like, listen, when you start to connect people on a one-on-one type of basis, or you start to care in that way, the sky's the limit,
Yeah. So it's funny that you just said that about LinkedIn, because I get hit up almost daily, as I'm sure all of us do, right? Where somebody's selling us something, and always positioned like, oh, I work with businesses just like yours, or, and it's like, you don't have any relevance or context or credibility behind that.
Right.
But what's interesting is a few months back, and I do believe in the value of building relationships on LinkedIn. Yeah. Right. That is what I'm going to say. I believe in that. I don't believe in cold LinkedIn selling. Right. So I actually created a LinkedIn introductory message for connection requests. I say I created it. It was just me being honest, but it literally starts with, I'm going to say that again, because I actually flipped it. It says, I love, in all capital letters, connecting with great people, but I hate, in all capital letters, cold LinkedIn selling.
Right.
And then I position and I say, I create a lot of free content for my community to really become the best version of themselves. If you want to learn more, connect, you'll see it. If you want to have a discussion, happy to do that as well, because I like to build relationships. Let me know, right?
Right.
And it's had a huge response, because people are just blown away that I literally got a response last week from somebody that said, oh my gosh, it is so refreshing to see that in writing. And it prompted her to write an article about how every LinkedIn connection and request, there's a human on the other side of it.
Right.
And that's like what she did it so eloquently. She talked about it. It's like, look, ask me how I've been doing. Ask me what's struggling. Ask about me. Don't jump into pitching and selling right away. Because that's the other thing I said in my thing is I was like, look, just connect to learn more. No pitch, no selling, I promise. Right. And it's been incredible, because I changed that messaging intentionally, and I use that almost exclusively now. And unless it's for a target or some other purpose, but the way people have received it, it just has gone to support how many people are so tired of just the blind cold selling and not focusing on building relationships and adding value, which is really what it's about.
Yeah. Adding value.
Right.
Adding value. Yeah. So we just
got off a call with, basically that's essentially what the whole premise of the conversation was.
Right. So as you know, and as our listeners know, we're in the branding, advertising type of space where, we're really trying to slay a beast of commercials and messaging and sales and marketing that are all about just get as many people into the door, try to get as many people to see it, and then hopefully one of them buys. And actually flip that and remind people that, especially on social media, it's all about conversations and a relationship that you're building with your audience. And you might think that, well, generally speaking, if you're a company, you have a very like a specific need that you're trying to meet, right? That you're trying to help people with, right? And so with that, your audience all has that in common. Yeah. So then that's the stuff that you have to continue to talk about. That's the conversation that you have to enter into in order to create value for them to want to continue to.
Your messaging has to have value to it. It can't just be buy our product, know about our product. It has to be what are we bringing to you, and what can you tell us?
100% agree. I think that those organizations that seek to add value and impact first, even if they seem like they may have a lag in their growth in certain ways, or there's some trail on it, in the long run, impact and value win every time.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. So that's what you end up fighting against when you have this type of philosophy is ROI, right? Return on investment. What's my immediate return on investment, right? Yeah. And it's like, okay, your immediate return on investment will stay consistent. However, we're talking about exponential growth, right? We're talking about like your audience starts here and it's going to go down and then it'll start to go up, right?
And by the way, it's not dissimilar as a coach, right? Mm-hmm. I've got people who literally hire me and they're like, they want results the next day. And it's like, well, okay, you've got however many years, 30, 40, 50 years of conditioning. Like we've got to unpack a couple of things before we can start to actually move in the right direction. And so it's not dissimilar because it's about the exponential effect. It's not about the immediate quick win, although there are always quick wins in the process. That's not what the game is about. And that's you're exactly right. The exponential place and then the consistency over time is what adds up.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, when we were talking about like how we've done 40 episodes and, we're doing like cocktail show too. And we don't get 100 million views on anything that we do. I mean, that would be crazy.
But, not even collectively.
Not even, right. So it's like you don't get that type of response right away and people quit on things, right? So like you're talking about coaching. That's a huge thing because, we've spoken to a few coaches and it's all about, there's a commitment aspect to it that you have to, because like you said, you got to unpack so much. Everything that you've ever done in your entire life might be the reason why you're not able to move forward or achieve your goals. But even from a content standpoint, a branding standpoint, that you're actually trying to add value and join a conversation, like it would be the same thing as if one of our listeners is a starting out coach and he immediately tried to get on a panel with the best coaches in the world. He's not going to get there, right? It's going to be, they're going to be like, no, you got to do the work. You gotta, there's time, there's experience. Yeah. And so that's a slow growth. And if you start out small and you start off working with the individual people that you want to actually help over time, as long as you're continuing genuine and you're consistent, genuine and consistent, something that we always preach.
You have to be genuine. You got to be consistent. Otherwise, because the thing is that if you're not genuine, you won't be consistent with it. Because true. It's disingenuous. And if you're not genuine, no one cares. And if you're genuine, but you don't consistently do it, everyone's going to be like, well, you know what? They don't even care about it enough to continue to do it.
There you go.
So why should I subscribe to them on YouTube? Why should I follow them on LinkedIn? Why should I comment on their posts? If they do it 3 times, they're like, well, I'm not a success yet.
No, but it's true. And that's the thing is like, there is no such thing as an overnight success. I one of my favorite quotes, I wish I could attribute it. One of these days I need to Google it and see who actually came up with it because it wasn't me. But it said, people are celebrated in public for what they've practiced in private for years.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And what that's really getting to is the core of what we just talked about. It's like so many people want the overnight success, particularly in this world of social media where social is people's highlight reels in a lot of cases. It's not showing all the grunt. It's not showing all the pain. It's not showing all the suffering behind the scenes to get them there. It's showing the outcome and the result, not the 5, 10, 15, 20 years it took them to get to where they are. And, I often say too, I love that genuine and consistent piece. I think that's huge. I've shared with you guys before, obviously, like my trifecta in a lot of cases for saying yes is relationships, value, and impact. But around that kind of idea of consistency, I say that consistency is key. Relentless consistency unlocks.
There you go. Yeah, that's great.
Right. Like you have to be relentlessly consistent in your effort to fulfill your potential. You have to be relentlessly consistent in your effort to meet your clients' needs and add value and be genuine in that process. And when you're relentlessly consistent, not just consistent, because we know the difference, right? Like there's a material difference between consistency and relentless consistency. Right. That's how you can sometimes shorten the curve, where it doesn't take 20 years. It might take 10, it might take 5. And it all depends on the business. It all depends on the launch. It all depends on the audience. But that's what's going to get you there.
Right.
And, back onto the other subject of being an overnight success, there's a thing where it's like I could be scrolling on Instagram right now, and there can be an account that has 2 million followers that I've never seen before. I'd never seen this person, and that's 2 million people. That's a lot, and I don't know this person. And so a lot of times people think like, overnight success, but then you don't really know who these people are until they have 5 million followers, 15 million followers. That's the threshold. And then everybody knows them because they have so many followers.
And the thing is there's obviously different philosophies. I 100% agree with what you just said, but it's like, we also know now in this game, like people can buy followers, people can buy likes, people can buy comments. Right. And so that's not to suggest that everybody who's got those followings has that. Right. By no means. There's people who organically, legitimately built that. But that's also the thing where people who don't go and buy those things can easily compare and be like, oh, I don't get the same kind of engagement in my stuff. Right. Or I don't get those kinds of likes and those kinds of numbers. But if we don't worry about impressions and we worry about impact, that's the difference over time, because you'll see those accounts that have 100, 200,000, 300,000, 500,000, 1 million followers, but they have focused on impact and they've done it the right way. They got into the game early, right? And then there's others that, again, that you can manipulate all of those things to put it on an appearance of a brand. I'll tell you the one thing that gets me, again, I say buying followers and buying likes and impressions, there might be a business reason and strategy for doing so. So I don't in any way mean to vilify that. But what I do see a lot of, which drives me insane, is all these fake gurus out there, these overnight successes that kind of position, well, I was broke 3 months ago, and now look at me in a $15 million mansion, sitting in front of 7 Rolls Royces and 2 Ferraris, none of which I own, but I can tell you that I own them because that's what you're going to believe on social. That what I don't like is when people use those images to manipulate or put a scarcity mindset into other people's worlds to motivate them to buy some get rich quick scheme, some fake guru stuff that doesn't really understand, has never actually been successful themselves. And a lot of those people have never even made 6 figures in their lives. Yeah. Like, is that going to be the model that we're going to follow?
Right.
And I have no problem vilifying that type of stuff because it's not authentic.
Right. It's not genuine. It's disingenuous.
Right. And going back to the impact, it's the individuals that you can impact. And I know that we have a handful of people that when we talk to them, they're like, I love everything that you guys do. I'm paying attention to you, right? And that means everything, right? Yeah. I got goosebumps, right? It's like I'm paying attention to what you guys are doing, right? And that's a handful. And then you get, other people that come in and go, depending on who the guest is, depending on, what subject it is. Well, there are people that we have that are listening every single podcast. Right. And they're like, I'm looking forward to it. And they share it and they engage with it and they come a part of the conversation. That's what you're looking for. And I mean, I've said that plenty of times too. Especially in the whole idea of impressions versus actual engagement with your videos and stuff. It's like, I don't care how many people see it.
Right.
I don't care. I could pay a good chunk of money and have everybody today watch before their YouTube video my commercial. Just this, me dancing, right? I could do that. That doesn't make a difference. It's like, what happens after, right? What happens after? Is there somebody that's like, wow, I can't wait to be a part of this conversation? And I think that's what's really missing. And across the board in all businesses is that it's a human value creation and joining the conversation, understanding that social media is a conversation and you need to ask to join it.
Right. Yeah. That's right. Again, I say impact over impressions. I also say value over vanity, right? It's kind of the same deal where it's like, if you really focus on impact and you focus on adding value, right? to your point, that's the kind of engagement that's good. And that following will remain consistent as long as you remain consistent in the content, the quality of the content, what you put out. And that following will also grow over time. And just like anything, there's going to be a slow launch. And then all of a sudden it's going to be exponential because all their friends are going to start following it. Then their friends are going to start following it. Then they're going to start sharing it. And then you're going to have one thing that's going to go viral that's going to put a whole bunch of eyes on it, which you can't predict. Like nobody can predict a piece of viral content, right? You just can't. I was just reading this morning, the guy who did that whole TikTok thing with cranberry juice on his longboard. He was literally living in a camper, right? He was living in a camper 4 months ago, and now he's had over $350,000 in sponsorships in the last few months because of that one viral piece of content, bought his first home, paid off of all of their debt, and they're living a completely different material life. He wasn't doing that for vanity. Right? He just was screwing around on TikTok and was like, oh, this is cool. But he's now got all these sponsorship deals and his life has changed overnight. Now, he might be the case of an overnight success, but can he replicate that?
Right. Probably not, though. Right? I mean, and I'm just thinking about, I think it was Ocean Spray. Wasn't it Ocean Spray?
Yeah, it was Ocean Spray. Yeah, it was cranberry juice, Ocean Spray.
Yeah, it's like how close that was. He was going to pick up a Tropicana, and Tropicana's going like, no. But you can't. Well, like to your point though, you can't predict that, and people try.
And you can't predict that, and so hopefully he makes really good decisions this time because the reality of it is that's probably not sustainable for him.
Right.
But did he change his life in one singular moment that was unpredictable, that was unplanned? Yes. Right. And so, but great intentional content creators who can put together amazing stories, who know how people engage in content, still can't predict it. So there's this guy who's screwing around on a cell phone, makes a few $100,000 in a matter of months, changes his life. That's the luck that happens sometimes in this.
Yeah.
But if you remove those scenarios, because they exist, right? It's about consistency and quality content.
Right. Yeah, we hear that all the time too, especially with clients that come to video production or come to social media, and they're like, I want this next viral video. And the more and the harder you stare at the word viral, the less sense it makes, right? And you're like, how could we possibly make a viral video? It's like, well, you look at the past, and the past is there's no common thread. There's no common thread. It's like everybody thought it was cats. Well, guess what? I see videos about cats all the time, and they don't have 300 million views on it. It's got like, a chunk of views. It's like, and then at the end of the day too, it's like, what is that cat selling? Unless it's cat food or a cat adoption or something like that, it's not going to really work in your favor as a brand anyway.
Right, but it's just like there is always exceptions to the rule, and the rule is you have to be consistent and genuine to in order to become viral. But there is also that thing where that guy was really genuine when he was doing that.
That's what I'm saying.
He's not the most I don't think he was the most handsome man in the world, but he just was genuine. He was singing a song you wouldn't necessarily assume that guy would be singing while he's on a longboard drinking cranberry juice. It just didn't make any sense. That's why it hooked.
It made no sense. And again, good for him, right? Like I love that happened and his life changed. But I think going back to the core of it, right? There are certain people who would have a piece of viral content that would then turn around and create a social profile around trying to help people create viral content. Think about it, right? Like the fake gurus out there, like there was no rhyme or reason to what he did. It hit because it was a random variable of events. The guy was super genuine. It was a super cool song that everybody could connect to. People love that idea of like being free and he's chugging. I mean, like just all these things. But you two are in a position where people ask you to create viral content. If you were different people, you would sell the dream that we can help you create that.
Right. Yeah.
But you're not because you understand that there's mechanics that go into it and we can't predict it. We can't guarantee that. And that's the difference, right?
Yeah,
there are people who literally would try to capitalize on the situation they were just in. And I don't mean get sponsorships and change your life for a scenario, but to bamboozle other people into being like, well, I did this once. Like, you can do it. I can teach you how to do it. Buy my 7-step course and I'll show you exactly what to do.
Yeah, right. For $7,000.
Yeah, right. Well, they'll probably charge more.
Oh yeah,
if he ended up making $300,000 in sponsorships and everything else, he'd probably charge more. He's like, you're going to make hand over fist on this.
So again, I don't mean to detour it on that guy and that topic, but I think that's like the really interesting thing about this, right?
Yeah.
Perspective is important. So when people, and to bring it right back to the beginning of where we started on this thing, perspective is what's important. And so when people can understand what this actually looks like, what content is, what's the purpose behind it, what's the impact that we're trying to make, what type of level of consistency can we commit to over the long haul to add value into our audience, those are the difference makers. And it's that perspective that I hope more people will hear and adopt into their business, their life, their content strategy, because that's what's going to make them. It's not the unpredictable stuff.
Right. Yeah. And to your point as well, I mean, there is all this really bad advice and bad people get torn up, and Chris Johnson, who connected us in the Strategic Introductions League, they have presenters, right? And there are presenters that are presenting on video, and the advice that they're giving is either really outdated or it's along those lines of like, well, yeah, I made somebody, this amount of money because of one of my videos, and that's what worked. And the strategy behind it is so flimsy, right? It's like a piece of paper, right? It's so flimsy, and there's no meat to it, And so there's so much bad advice out there, and you can hear it too when people ask questions. They really don't know. They don't understand.
People don't know what they don't know.
Yeah. They don't understand social media, right? Even people that, are young enough to have said that, like, they grew up with social media, like it was there at the formative years, right? There are people out there that really don't know, and they try to take that, right? The people that grew up with social media and be like, well, I know this because I've been on it for how many years. And in reality, do you really know? Because I don't think you really do, because it's not, you really have to do some deep work into getting to understand like what a brand needs to do to connect and enter into a conversation rather than you personally. And that can go back to perspective as well.
Yeah, 100% agree with all of that. And, I think it's exactly right. It doesn't matter how long we've been doing it. The algorithms and the game changes like every single day. Yeah. So it's like what worked yesterday doesn't necessarily work tomorrow. And so I think that's the other misnomer that people kind of take. There are generalized strategies that work, generalized tactics that work. But, content we also can't predict either. I'll give a personal example. I've released, I don't know how many videos, right? I've got a YouTube channel. There's probably 70-ish videos on there, but a bunch of other micro pieces of content, been on a bunch of different platforms. And I don't say any of that to impress. I say it to say, I don't even know the highest amount of user engagement I have on any one, but it's not anything like crazy off the charts.
Right. Mm-hmm.
My son was in my studio as I was setting it up originally and said, Dad, can I film a video? Mm. And I said, yeah, buddy, what do you want to talk about? And he literally said to me, just turn the camera on and start talking. And he said, just turn the camera on and I'll start talking. He's 6, right? And he dropped like 5 minutes of really hard-hitting content on what it's like in quarantine. This was 4 or 5 months ago. Yeah. And he was wearing a Captain America suit, and he was talking about it from like, getting people together and like how hard this is and blah, 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 right? Like, I can't even paraphrase exactly what he said, but the guy just like dropped the mic. And I caught it all on video, and I was like, I need to put this out. I need to put this piece of content out. In 3 days, he had tens of thousands of views.
Yeah.
Like 3 days, tens of thousands on multiple different platforms. None of my pieces of content have even gotten close to the total number of views his has now. And I tell him that all the time. I'm like, dude, it's 6. You've done one video and you crushed it over me, right? Yeah. I prop him up all the time. But could I have predicted that? No. Was that planned? No. Is there anything I could do in that to recreate it? Absolutely not.
No. And people would hear that and they'd go like, oh, well, I have a young child at home and they're going to sell my, whatever. And then you put a lot of pressure on children, which once again, it should be very spontaneous if they want to be on something.
And to the point of the guy on the skateboard, right? My son did this. It was raw. It was real. He was genuine. It came from his heart. And it's a cute 6-year-old wearing a Captain America suit talking about a really relevant real world time experience.
Right.
Combination of a perfect amount of variables, and it just worked.
Yeah.
But, I think the reason I share that story is it's like, I don't know. I've been doing this for a while. I'm not even content experts. I just put a lot out.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have predicted that.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely not. Right. Yeah. And then you end up, people try to replicate what they see, right? Which already means that you're behind the 8 ball. In the film industry, which we're really active in via networking and everything. One of the guys, Richard Bodo. I can never remember. It's either Bodo or Bodo. With accents, all of a sudden, all vowels, you have to double check with people on actually how to pronounce it. But he's the CEO of Stage 32, which is basically like an online LinkedIn for filmmakers, right? And what did he say? Like, he keeps on getting people emailing like, hey, should I write the next, the next COVID like pandemic script, or should I write, trying to catch up to a trend, right? So say like with the Marvel universe and it's like, oh, I'm trying to write the next, great Michael Bay movie. Not Michael Bay. Michael Bay's irrelevant, but
no, but like
I know the point you're making. Yeah.
Right. One of the things is that because people see that these apocalypse movies like Contagion and 2012 are now like at the start of the pandemic, they were the highest rated movies and shows after being dead for like however many years they had came out for, and then everybody's
like literally dead,
right?
Like nobody watched them.
No one
all
did.
Of a sudden they were hot, right?
And then everybody's like, "Are you getting more?" Like everybody's saying, "Should we write the next great pandemic script?" And he said, "No." We're living through it. No one wants to watch that after. You want 2021 coming, COVID-19. No one wants to watch. Why am I going to go out to the movie theater and watch that movie? And I experienced it and it sucked.
Right. And my point was, it's like chasing a trend, right? And so when you see those, like if somebody saw your son talking about that, they're like, oh, that's the next best thing. I got to get on that. I got to force my child to go talk about this and talk about the pandemic. And then you start running through it. And then by the time, even if it was a good idea, which it isn't, it'd already be over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're already done.
The algorithm changed. No, the algorithm changed.
Right, the algorithm changed. The what people are looking for changed. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there as a business posting up a meme that's been dead for like 2 years. And you're missing it. You're missing the connection there.
Well, that's because you're not in the conversation.
Right, exactly. You're trying to be hip or cool.
Yeah, you're trying to hijack the conversation.
There you go, hijack. Right, that's what we say all the time about commercials, is that they're parasites.
Parasites. They try to take the attention of your content without adding anything to it.
Huh.
A commercial can't exist without content.
Right.
Would you watch the commercial channel?
I love how you phrased that. I've just never heard anybody say it like that before. I think it's spot on. I think you're exactly right, because they're trying to capitalize on attention by paying to get the attention. And
that people are going to look for.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
no one's watching Flow if it wasn't right before SmackDown.
Right. Exactly. But not many people. SmackDown's real. I don't know how into wrestling we are, but they've really kind of fallen off. I mean, back when we were younger, it was much better.
Yeah, right. Well, that's also, there was a certain level.
What I'm hearing is that you still watch wrestling.
Yeah, no, we do. And Friday nights.
Kind of more ironically. We watch it ironically.
Yeah.
It's not quite as serious as it was when we were 12.
Right.
Hey, no judgment. I'm just saying.
No.
Well, there's such an opportunity for them to be so much better than what they are. But once again, they're looking at storytelling from a villain, good guy standpoint. Yeah. And that's not... All you have to do is look at the Marvel Universe and understand that a villain, bad guy situation isn't necessarily... People want to feel and understand a human being on all sides. Everybody has good sides. Everybody has bad sides. Everybody does stuff that's like, why do they do it? They have deeper motivations rather than, I'm the good guy and I'm the bad guy, so we're going to fight.
Right. That's what.
Hopefully someday we'll be able to do some consulting for the WWE or one of those. That would be a lot of fun. A lot of fun, because they're missing out on some really good. Like we talk about transmedia all the time, and transmedia has been not popularized but theorized by Jeff Gomez, who is just out of this world, out of his mind.
That's a good podcast.
That's a good podcast. And actually, I have to connect Jeff to a few more people that I've talked to, but I think that you talking to him, he'll blow your mind. This guy is at the forefront. Nobody knows who he is, but he is the industry leader in storytelling.
Oh, I'd love to.
He is absolutely amazing. Yeah. So, but the whole idea is that your story has to exist in different mediums and across different platforms, and all be kind of morphing themselves to match the conversations that are happening there, right? Seems kind of like, oh yeah, of course, but nobody does it. Right? Yeah. So like, just go back to SmackDown, you have a character that exists on Twitter, who exists on Facebook, who exists in the ring, who exists backstage, and all those are all parts and facets of that character that have to be consistent. What the WWE is running into is that on my Twitter feed, right, I'm just normal Frank, but when I'm in the ring, I'm Dead Man Frank, right? And it doesn't match. It doesn't matter. All of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to a cupcake shop. And it's like, Dead Man Frank would never go to a cupcake shop. That man eats people, And so it's like that. There's that. So that's the transmedia storytelling. It has to be consistent on all these different things. The characters, your brand, everybody, you, right? If Brian, if you're on LinkedIn and you're talking about something that's very much a business oriented, very coaching stuff, is that going to work on Instagram where people are looking for more style and looking for more fashion or looking for pictures or looking like what is going to work? And we're struggling with that too with our podcast. I know our stuff when we do the little segments, and you'll see these segments too once your podcast episode comes out, where they're little short things, and you get pretty decent engagement because it's LinkedIn. That's what they're looking for. But on our Instagram, not really all that much. The cocktail show does better on Instagram. Doesn't really do all that much on LinkedIn. So you kind of have to understand those. Right. And that's what transmedia storytelling is.
Right. Your audience will change depending on where
what they're looking for. The person might not change. It's what they're looking for.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's interesting that you're saying this though, because I conceptually agree with a whole lot, but I think going back to the idea of being genuine as well, like I'll tell you personally, that's something that I struggle with. Is it's like I'm Brian. I'm all facets of Brian.
Right.
And so all facets of Brian and content get posted on every single platform. Right. And you'll see that the different facets will be more successful on certain days, on certain different platforms than on others. But there's also a part of me that, I had somebody a few months back say, they literally said to me, and I this isn't like a brag at me, it just was what it was. They said, you need to dumb down your content for two of the platforms. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to call out what they are because it doesn't matter. But they were like, you need to dumb down your content. And I was like, I'm not going to change who I am or my message because the platform you're implying has either less intelligent people or somebody else like that it just isn't going to hit the audience. I'm like, the thing is, I genuinely believe, and this goes back to what we were talking about before, if you put out genuine, authentic, consistent content, people will find your brand that needs back to it from that standpoint, from a social strategy, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That said, there are different applications on different platforms. So I agree with that, but I'll say I struggle with that because there's a part of me that's like, I'm not going to put out something on LinkedIn that's then different on Instagram, or put something on Facebook that's different on Instagram, on Twitter, right? Like I'm going to kind of put the same stuff out because it's consistent with who I am. And I'm open to your feedback.
Yeah. So what I would say is we can go back to perspective, right? What are people looking for on that platform? Yeah. And if you think about it from the audience forward, which is the way that all storytelling should be, it's like, what is the audience looking for and how can I make my message them, right? For too long, advertising and broadcast and marketing sales has all been about what I want. What do I want them to know? And now it's like, what are they looking for? What conversation can I join in? So it's a perspective thing. So I don't think you have to change. It's not even changing the message. It's just changing the delivery of it to kind of match a little bit more of what people are expecting to see on Instagram or LinkedIn or any site.
So, Right. And then you have to also do that in a way that doesn't seem kitschy or salesy or like I'm going. It's a difficult art.
It's a different balance.
It's a different balance.
No, I can appreciate that. So
but it all has to come back to that genuine. If you don't want to do it that way, then don't, because that's going to impact you a lot worse than not doing that way. Because it's like, if you're not going to be into it and it's going to come off as like, wow, I feel like one of those fake gurus, then don't do it.
Well, that was kind of my thought process for me, right? I mean, one of the personas is getting people to the core of who they are, most authentic selves, authenticity, genuine approach, like who I am, like all facets of it. I want to show up in and I talk about this, I want to show up in all aspects of my life as the same version of me. Even if they're different roles, like it's still me, and the core of me is still felt, and it's not fabricated or manipulated based on the audience, right? Yeah. And so, again, that's just core to who I am in my brand, which is why I've taken that approach, because if I manipulate or fabricate based simply on that. Now, to your point, what you said a second ago that I think is critical, we will change the formatting of the content based on the platform.
Yeah.
So that it's more consumable. So Instagram, right, for Instagram Reels or Stories will look and appear different on that platform, even the exact same piece of content, just because of how it will absorb and the ratios and the profile graphics that we put on it. It looks and feels different than the other platforms because of how it uploads differently, how people consume it differently, but the content's the same. So I think for me, I guess I'm more speaking about around content, but you're also talking about not just content, but delivery of content.
Right. And the delivery part about it, I mean, that stuff's very important too, because, and I've struggled with this, right? We're filmmakers, right? I have this, right? This is my eye. That's what I like to see. I hate squares. Right? So like on Instagram, right, our videos are going to be 16 by 9. Because that's how I digest it. That's how I like to see it, right? Now, Jack has made the argument that they should be squares, right? And I haven't given into that argument yet. But eventually I will, right? And it really just depends, like, you know, like we're shooting right now on another camera. That isn't going to translate to a square. So now the question is okay, well, how do I do that, right? We have 3 different ways that we can edit this, right? I could do it all just with you nodding your head, right? And just hearing me in the background. It could just be me and Jack, which this might be able to become a square, right? Maybe cut there and cut there, right? So maybe you only do one camera angle, but you just kind of have to think about that stuff going into it.
Yeah. But I mean, what you're doing there, and I think the theme of everything that we've talked about, right? It gets back to 2 core philosophies that I have, which is really based around awareness and intentionality. Yeah. Right. Like if we're not aware of the differences in the platforms, if we're not aware of the audience and how they're going to consume it, if we're not aware of who we are, what our brand is, what our message is, what our content will look like, we can't then be intentional about it. So everything that we do, I think, starts with some awareness, because if we seek awareness, and I mean that holistically in life, I'm applying it to the content realm for now, but I think seeking a higher level of awareness is kind of a thing that applies to everything. Because what we're not aware of, we can't be intentional with. We can't control, we can't influence, we can't change the outcome. So and part of that's perspective. Seeking more perspectives helps us raise our level of awareness. Then we can become intentional with it. And just what you talked about, right? Look, knowing that that's your preference, knowing and you're being aware of the fact that it's like, I like 16.9 because that's how I consume content. By the way, I'm the same way. I like that format better. And so it's like, how do you edit it? How do you put graphics around it so it still appears 16 by 9? How do you deliver it in a way that's consistent? Right. But because you're aware of that, and because you're aware of your own preference and the difference between the two of you, you can now be intentional with a strategy and a tactic moving forward to apply to that.
Right. I mean, even down to the point where when we post up the like any sort of content that has the podcast thumbnail in it, right? I know that the thumbnail has to be a square, right? I've given in on that one because otherwise it's not going to fit anything, right? But then I have like these bars on the outside, which are just colors, right? So that when at the end of the Instagram post and I choose the cover, it's literally going to be that thumbnail, right? And it's going to look perfect, and it does, right? And I know that, and then after it goes, and I have it swipe over to the side where you can link to the podcast and stuff. But just even that kind of stuff, knowing that at the end result, when I publish it, this is how this platform functions, right? This is how it's going to display it. So I have to be thinking about that from the start.
And that kind of segues into the whole idea of being consistent, because without being consistent, we would never figure out any of that crap.
Right.
Because you have enough volume and enough reps to be able to understand it.
Right, exactly. You need to do things, and like that's the 2 sides of becoming. I don't know how this became a podcast about trying to become consistent and trying to create content that one day might be able to go viral. Right. But like that's the best strategy to do it. It is to be consistent and be genuine, and eventually you'll have enough reps to actually catapult that one video into the mainstream. And then you can then say, hey, we got a lot more content. It's not just one. Like that $300,000 sponsorship might not just be once, because we can replicate our work. Not necessarily the viralness, but you can replicate your work.
I promise you there are people at Ocean Spray right now going like, okay, so we had this whole thing TikTok. Everybody's on surfboards or skateboards going around drinking our cranberry juice. How do we capitalize on it? And like, well, you've already lost. If that's your standpoint, if that's your outlook, you're already done. Yeah. It's over.
It's going to be, The campaign is basically going to be drink Ocean Spray on a skateboard.
Here's a prediction. Ocean Spray is going to take out a Super Bowl ad, and it's going to be people skateboarding and drinking Ocean Spray. And they're going to try their darndest to get that trending again, and it is not going to work.
We have a few months to see if you're going to be right on that prediction.
I don't know. It just kind of came to my head, and I wouldn't rule it out.
This clip might go viral.
Yeah, right there.
I was just going to say, this is one of those where you're going to get to be able to have a side-by-side like Gary Vee does, where it's like, here's what I'm predicting. You show the reel, and then it's like, here's what it is, and here's where we go. I love how confident you were in that. You just rolled on that. Yeah, I think you take the piece with talking about the WWE, you repurpose that, send it to them, give them that little clip, because at some point you'll be able to do that same thing there. Oh, yeah. And you do this prediction on the Super Bowl with Ocean Spray. man, you might be on something.
Hey, you know what? If you have a confidence in your thought process, then you go ahead and say it. That's just what it kind of came
in the world.
But I did want to mention something else that was we spoke about, and I can't remember it for the life of me now, because then all of a sudden the prediction took over all of my neurons, and now I can't remember what it was. It was something about how to your point, being consistent and genuine, you have to make every piece of content that you make has to have the intention of, this is going to be the one. This is going to be the one that I get an extra 100 views on. This is going to be the one that people are going to share, right? This is going to be the one that makes it for me and actually shows that I know what I'm talking about, whether that's, actual branding on our side or if it's like coaching wise,
Yeah.
This is the one.
So I agree with you around always trying to be great, set the bar high, make sure that you're delivering quality content. The only piece I want to challenge on that, and this is only from my own perspective, is I think that there's different mediums of content that would align with that, right? So there's going to be longer form specific videos. There's going to be short ones. There's going to be 15-second reels, minute reels, right? I've got longer form content, and then I've got 3 to 5 minute videos in Bogert's Bullets that are truly just organic and raw. And I don't know if they're going to be the next great thing or not. Right. But what I do know is I'm talking to somebody, because every single piece of content I get feedback on. And I know that I'm impacting somebody's life because I'm putting out a real piece of content that's going to be relevant for someone. So that's the only piece I want to say is like, I only because I want everybody who's listening to look at it through the lens of like, always seek greatness, always shoot for the sky, always try to be as dialed in, make sure that it aligns with your brand, make sure that you're focusing on quality content, delivery, lighting, sound, all of the works. Like, make it as good as you possibly can on your budget.
Yeah.
But what I've learned in my own process is that sometimes the least produced pieces of content are the ones that hit the hardest.
Yeah, I think and that's absolutely true. And I think I'm just talking the intentionality of it.
100% agree. And that's why I just wanted to clarify to make sure that people heard it. Because I agree with the intention. Always seek to put out the highest quality content possible. But I don't want people to get stuck in the tactics and delivery of it.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And we spoke about that during our pre-podcast too, about how you find people that'll get stopped in the swamp of going like, well, I don't have the right equipment to do it.
Right.
I just spoke to somebody yesterday. He's like, oh yeah, I just bought this, a $75 mic. It's not the best. Maybe one day I'll buy a $5,000 mic. I'm like, your voice isn't really going to change. What it's going to pick up, marginal, right? Yeah. I mean, you got the budget to do it, go ahead. But for the most part, you don't have to, right? You can literally, like this microphone that we're using, right?
I think it's $10, right?
It might be $10.
Perfect.
Yeah. And you know what? I like the way that we sound on it. When I'm in there editing and everything, that's going to be a loud spike that I'm not going to be able to get rid of during editing, but that's okay, right? At least I know.
Right.
But regardless of what the technology is, turn the camera on and start talking.
Yes.
Right? Well, here's the thing. If all you have is access to a smartphone, guess what? They produce good enough video for a lot of people. Like, it's fine, right? Yeah. I mean, if you look back at, I've referenced Bogert's Bullets a couple of times just because it's probably the longest standing consistent thing that I've done around like a branded type of piece of content that's been consistent. It's weekly now. It started, I think, with 40 episodes in the very beginning, in the very first year, probably 5.5 years ago. And then I stopped doing it, and I'll tell you why. But I want to start with the technology piece first, because that's really critical. It literally started with a GoPro, a basic green screen, and a 2-light setup.
Yeah.
And a small lavalier mic that I think cost me $15. All in, the entire investment in it, I think at the time was like $350.
Yeah.
And I did it because I wanted to create something that was different. It was easier to do that than it was because 5-6 years ago, cameras on phones weren't as good. So I needed the GoPro. If I had started now, I'd literally use my iPhone. Yeah. Because the camera quality is so good, right, that it masks a whole lot of the stuff. Yeah. What I want people to focus on is much more literally content.
Yeah.
Focus on the quality of the content. The quality of the production can always be improved, but if you've got great production and horrible content, it doesn't matter. Right. But if you have great content and horrible production, you could still go viral. You could still have impact. You can still have people resonate with it. And you fast forward to today, I started with that, right? I now have a DSLR camera, an actual studio setup. I have a 5-light setup. I actually have all of this set up, and it's a full virtual studio. There's soundproofing, there's lights. I have a way better microphone than I had, right?
Yeah.
It evolved. I literally just bought another DSLR camera that I can start repurposing with a shotgun mic that sits on top. I spent way more money on this most recent piece of equipment than I did for the pieces of equipment that I used for 4 to 5 years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because now it's grown to a point, the brand has grown to a point, that the following has grown to a point that it's like, we're going to continue to up the production quality. Because why wouldn't we? Right? If we can continue to push the envelope from that standpoint. And the content also happens to be improving over time. At least that's the feedback we get.
Yeah.
If you look back at those early videos, this is the piece I was going to tell you. I stopped doing them after 40 because people who knew me, had seen me speak on stage, or who just knew me in life would see the content. They were like, yeah, it's good, but it's not you. Anybody who saw the content who didn't know me was like, oh, this is awesome content. But if you go back and you look at, if you go to my Bogert's Bullets on my YouTube channel and you look at the most recent 2 to 3 episodes and you go and you watch the first 3 to 5, it's like a different person.
Yeah.
It's like a different delivery because I fabricated stuff because I saw other people doing things and I felt like I had to deliver a different kind of energy. I had to deliver it in a certain way. I was way more structured in my content. I was way more in my head around doing it instead of allowing it to just be authentic, right? And it took me a minute to calibrate on that. But the reason I went there is it's like really low budget production. Content was pretty good, but it still wasn't me.
Yeah.
The changing point was when the authenticity of the video went through the roof. The production quality was the same. And it was that then that allowed me to start to realize if I invest further in the production quality as well, as the content has already improved, then all of a sudden I've got a winning combination.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's true of anyone who starts on YouTube. I mean,
that's true, yeah.
all the people that I follow on YouTube, I follow them, and they have, like what I said, they've already been viral. They've already had the million subscribers. But you look back at like the first video, and you're like, this thing got 1 million views.
Well, they got 1 million views because people are backtracking.
Right. But I mean, that's where it started. The guy is terribly lit. The bar's really small, and he's talking very quietly, kind of unsure of himself.
That's right.
I wonder what show you're talking about.
And now, no, but now, it's like 1 million. He has this huge setup. It's like what you said, the production's through the roof, and he is more comfortable doing it. And I think that that's the other thing about being consistent with it is that you start to become more comfortable being on camera, and then you can start being authentically who you are on camera instead of being in your head, oh, well, I have to say these things like this. I got to keep my voice up because if I mumble and I talk like this, no one can hear me. But all that stuff becomes more natural as you continue to do it. And then as you continue to do it, you build up that audience, and then you can say, hey, you know what? I need a nicer camera. I need a better set. Let's start to invest in this because it's worth it.
Isn't it funny how so many of these topics have overlapped through the entire conversation today? Because consistency on understanding how to post on certain platforms, which is actually about the consistent aspect of doing it. We talked about the reps, right? The same thing with camera. That's why I say just turn the camera on and start talking. Because the reps are what's going to matter. That's where you're going to start to calibrate your own authentic voice. You're going to understand like what does your audience start to resonate with, and that doesn't mean fabricated. It just means how do I calibrate myself so that I'm authentic, adding value, focusing on impact, but that it's not something that I have to focus on creating. I can document the process. I can turn the camera on, say what I need to say, produce it into a piece of content, and then it all of a sudden is having all of those other aspects of impact. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So, for those that are listening to this, I think that's it. Just start with your phone. Literally just start.
Yeah.
Turn your phone on, turn the camera on, and start talking. And once you've started doing it for a little while, then start worrying about like, where do you tweak and how do you change and how do you improve it? And where does this align with my brand? And how do I make sure I'm speaking to my audience appropriately? Like, I think sometimes people get way too far ahead of themselves in thinking about that stuff. And I'm going to mean that more for like individuals, I think, but businesses, even the same thing. Even if they started and they weren't ready to hire people like you, starting the process at least gives them some bearing of understanding of what the world looks like. So that when they grow to a place where they can hire people like you who will take them to the next level in their content, right? At least they've already got some under their belt.
Right. Yeah. That's the whole thing. We spoke to that about with another person that I can't really remember, but the that like if somebody comes to us, and this just happened the other day, and they're like, I need a video. And I was like, all right, hold your horses. Right? Hold your horses. Let's jump on a call and let's talk to, our strategy guy, and let's try to set up some stuff that you can kind of do yourself, right? Get started here. I don't want you spending however much your marketing budget is on a video with us and then being like, why did I do that? You got to understand the process, and to your point, once you have an appreciation for the process, it gets a lot easier, right? It gets a lot easier to be like, oh, well, I never want to do that again, or understanding
100%.
like where some of these ideas are coming from, and then seeing where the trajectory is and what we're seeing from a storytelling standpoint.
And by the way, I think that applies to lots of things in life. I think as entrepreneurs and business owners too, it's like be willing to do the things that you normally wouldn't do, so you have understanding and perspective of what those things are. Right.
Those are the most intelligent people on the planet, are the ones that know.
I mean, if you look at my risk management employee benefits consulting career, I mean, it started as an intern. It grew into, I was doing my own account management, marketing and servicing and all these things, and then grew to a partner where it's like, I didn't have to touch any of that stuff. Right. And that's okay. But I understood soup to nuts, the whole process. It's the same thing now in my content though. When I started with my GoPro, when it was just a side business that was fulfilling a whole different passion for me, and I still just wanted to have impact and put out content, guess what? I did it all myself.
Right.
I started basic editing in iMovie.
Yeah.
Right. I understood what the editing process looked like. I understood the difference between lighting and color correction and sound. By the way, I hate that stuff. I did it because I needed to, and I didn't feel like it justified spending the money or investment on. But now I'm in a place where it's like, I literally just record because I have the studio and I send it off, and I don't touch it from there. Because my team will run it from there, because they do all the stuff that I understand enough to be able to give them direction on how I want it. But at the same time, I give them the creative freedom to go do what they need to do, and then I can do what I need to do. That's leverage, right? Yeah. Asking the questions on what are the things that only I can do? What are the things that someone else can do? What are the things that don't even need to be done?
Right.
90% fits into these two categories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whether you're in content creation, just a general entrepreneur, just apply that in life. If you can focus on only the things that only you can do, that's where things start to become incremental, exponential.
Yeah.
But sometimes we have to start doing those other 90% to build up so that we can create that opportunity to only live where we want to.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. That's the entrepreneurial pickle that you find yourself in, is that you at some point you have to be like, all right, I can't do this. I can't do the nitty gritty stuff if I want to see where this goes. And, we see entrepreneurs get caught there all the time. But to your point as well, you have to start, and the more that you understand about a certain process, if it's fundamental to your business, the easier it is to talk to those people when they're telling you there's a problem, or they're telling you what they want to do. You're like, I understand, right? You don't want to get into a Nick Cage accountant thing, right? Where he doesn't know what the guy's doing and all of a sudden he loses all of his money, right? You want to be able to understand some of those things. And it's that's why entrepreneurship is so fun. It's so exciting. There's all this stuff that you're like, oh, I didn't even know about that. After joining that Tech Accelerator Workbox here in Chicago, I mean, my knowledge on everything has tripled, right? And now I'm more aware of certain things, and I can't wait to find out more.
Yeah, right.
Big data. Oh, I love big. I'm finding I have a little bit of a sweet tooth for big data. I'm enjoying hearing people and what they're doing with it and what they're trying to do. I'm like, ooh,
it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So you're gonna I'm gonna say this on the show because I think at some point he's gonna be on your show. So I'm just embedding this as a prediction.
Okay, there you go.
Right, that is what Kevin Sayo is doing. One of the guys I connected you with.
Yeah.
The guy is brilliant. He's using data in a really meaningful way. So I'll break it down in my completely dense way of understanding it. But essentially they have a content company too, right? So the whole point of your show is the cross section between business and content, right? And how do we use it appropriately? How can they feed each other? And what's fascinating is he actually started with his content company right around the time of COVID, because he has a passion for restaurants.
Yeah.
And so what they started doing was highlighting a bunch of like individual restaurants and creating really highly produced, awesome, artistic, cinematic type content that features food and experiences and those types of things. Well, it just so happens that he also has access to credit card processing data that gives a whole lot of information when it's used appropriately around buyer trends, buyer tendencies, where are they going to spend the most amount of money for the types of restaurants in certain zip codes. Like, he's learned how to use payment processing data in an effective way for restaurants to make decisions. The reason I tell you that is he's approaching it not just from a content creation standpoint, but he's also really using the data to target where their content is going to go when they're consulting with restaurants. But the really beautiful thing about it as well is he actually doesn't really love the data side. What he's doing is using the data side to justify a financial reason to drive money and monetization through the business so that he can fill his passion to create really fun content in the restaurant field.
Right. That's amazing.
They had to find that solution using data so that they could monetize what they were doing on a bigger and better level. Yeah. That's big data. And he's using it in a way that no one else is using it. So talk about consulting with restaurants and understanding exactly where to put your next location. Well, I have the data to tell you exactly where to put it and where to put your ads and how to spend your money and where do we get your people and where are the folks actually coming from that are buying your product? Because why don't we go to them instead of them coming to you if it makes sense?
I have to talk to this man because there's somebody at Workbox that's doing a God, I should just avoid that word altogether. A very similar thing in alcohol within restaurants and understanding where, like, helping these distribution companies go like, all right, well, why is not your father's root beer or not your dad's root beer not selling here? Or are people even buying it? Because the restaurant industry is very like, we don't know who bought it. We just know how much volume we sold, you know? And so, what a connection that might be. So that's great.
I'm sure that, I had to share that because you were talking about big data. It's like, look, there's big data actually influencing content and the intersection of business.
There you go. Yeah.
The guy's going to be on your show. I predict it today because he's brilliant. You're going to love him. And I'm sure you guys are going to find other ways to collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, awesome. 100%. I'm so excited to talk to him again. Or not talk to him again, but finally get him on the horn because he was the one that we had scheduled and then something came up. This has been a great conversation, Brian. I really appreciate you jumping on with us. We usually end off with some words of wisdom, anything that you think that kind of sums up the conversation
in a good way.
Value, consistency.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to give it to you. I mean,
it's the same trends that went through all of this. You know, I'm going to give one piece, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper on this because I think this is going to relate to everything. Again, we talked about awareness and intentionality, right? But I'm going to start with awareness. I think that everybody listening to the show, I don't care what industry you're in, I don't care if you're a content creator, if you're an entrepreneur, I don't care. This is the case for almost everybody I've ever talked to. And I'm going to ask both of you a question to confirm whether or not this is true.
Sure.
Do either of you desire to have a higher level of control or influence in the direction of your life, your business, the outcomes? Like, do you feel like if you could have more influence or control, you'd like that?
Of course.
Yeah.
The answer is always yes. Okay. The reality of it is our minds process 11 million bits of information per second, but we're only consciously aware of about 40. So what that means is we're largely led by the unconscious. Mm-hmm. So until we go through a systematic process of moving the unconscious to the conscious, the unaware to the aware, it's going to feel like life is happening to us, like it's fate, and like we have no control or influence over the direction or the outcome of where we're going. And so that's the piece I want to lean everybody on right this. If we look at consistency, if we look at perspective, if we look at awareness, if we look at intentionality, all the topics that we talked about today connect with this. It's about raising our level of awareness to the highest level possible so that we can understand the themes, the trends in every one of those topics.
Yeah.
And so if there's one piece of advice I'm going to ask people, it's to just take a moment to try to turn yourself into raising your level of awareness in every aspect of your life. And one thing I didn't mention earlier is in my human behavior and performance work, I'm on a mission to impact 1 billion lives.
Right.
In the next 25 years, right? One of the big core concepts of that is awareness and intentionality. And ultimately, we want to reduce the amount of suffering in the world so that people can actually experience joy, freedom, and fulfillment. So if you don't know how to do this, if you don't know how to raise your level of awareness, if you don't know the questions to ask yourself to go on that intrinsic journey so you can get more freedom, joy, and fulfillment in your life, go to nolimitsprelude.com. There's a free download there that's a summary of a lot of our coaching philosophies, but it's really questions to help get you started on that intrinsic journey of raising your level of awareness so you can be more intentional, consistent, and seek perspective of others in every aspect of your life.
Great. Excellent. Well, I'm so happy that we were able to do this podcast and this conversation. I'm also really happy to say that it is 12:44, and that gives you 15 minutes of a break. And that makes me happy as well, because Brian's running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Soon to be 1 billion, right?
Yeah, right.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to talking again soon.
Yeah, gents, I really appreciate it. And thanks for creating a platform to put good into the world. And help change the perspective of other people. I mean, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be with you unless you'd already been 39 episodes in. So
there you go.
You know, you guys doing this, you're impacting people's lives, you're adding value, you're focusing on relationships, and I can't wait till we talk again soon.
Thanks so much for watching.
This has been a great season 1, 40 episodes of great conversations, and we know that everybody here just wants more conversations. But honestly, we need to reschedule. We need to reassess how we're going to get you more episodes
of more impactful people like Brian, who you just listened to, who was absolutely amazing. We want more people like that. But yeah, so we will be back the week of the 4th with new conversations. So stick around and have a great holiday season.
Yep.